Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Oliver Empton. I'm the CEO of Silktide, and today I'll be delivering a webinar introducing our new Silktide Analytics platform. So the first obvious question is, why on earth does the world need another analytics platform? I know that as the CEO of Silktide for the longest time, I didn't want one. I actually resisted the calling to architect a new analytics platform because, simply put, I didn't think it would be needed. I just assumed, people have existing solutions like Google Analytics that were potentially freely available and familiar to them, and why would they need anything else? So I pushed back on this for a long time. But what changed my mind was talking to our customers and learning from them the kinds of problems that they were experiencing. And this gave me a newfound appreciation of where existing services were letting people down. So let's talk a little bit about that. What are the main areas that we found that, for our customers at least, existing analytics providers were not really fulfilling their needs? Well, the first one, which may seem trite, is that they were very hard to use. Although analytics is commonplace, the understanding of the terminology and the features within analytics is not. And so what this meant was a lot of people had an analytics solution, but they weren't actually adopting it. We found it was incredibly difficult for a lot of people to prove ROI, as in, is the ROI of their website positive? Are the things that they're doing actually working for their visitors? We also found it was particularly hard to identify actionable insights, things that they could do to their website that would actually improve the figures they were measuring. It's all in good seeing you've got 1,000 visitors per minute on this page, but what does that actually tell you you need to do differently? It didn't help with QA, which of course is kind of our focus as a business. And so there are some specific areas that we realized could be aligned with what we're doing elsewhere. And lastly, and this is a relatively recent one, but over the recent years, the presence of analytics has actually become something of a stigmatized activity because it requires that you put cookie banners up on your site. It requires that you ask users for permission, and people are understandably wary about giving that permission to, say, companies like Google. So what we came up with was 5 key areas addressing those points. These are the core of our value proposition for our new Silktide Analytics platform. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk us through these 5. I'm going to show you what we do differently and how it works. And then at the end, there'll be time for your questions. So the first point is that we have aimed to build analytics that you will actually use. Now, sure, that may sound kind of self-explanatory, but actually we found this was, if anything, like the largest point that our customers were experiencing, which was that they would often have an analytics solution, but it wasn't adopted. To give you some specifics, you would have something like Google Analytics, right? And people would go, well, we need to train our staff to use it. We need to authorize our staff to use it because there are security and privacy concerns and GDPR issues. They need to make sure they're not going to do anything stupid or dangerous. And after all of that, are they actually getting value that's worth all of that effort and energy and time? So we kind of adopted a different approach. Now, just to contrast that, I want to start off by showing you a little bit of the status quo. So this is kind of a bit of traditional analytics, just for those of you who aren't already deeply familiar with this particular set of pain points.
Just to give you a quick feel of the state of traditional analytics platforms, this is Google Analytics. And whilst this platform contains a lot of valuable information, the majority of this information is extremely hard to access or understand. So just to give you a few quick examples, I'm looking here at the welcome screen for a website, and you'll see immediately I've got information like my users, sessions, bounce rate, and session duration. But you might well ask, what exactly are those things? What is a session? What is a bounce rate? Is a higher or a lower bounce rate better? Unless you've actually sat down and studied these topics, which you would need to look at a separate website for, you probably don't have a clue. And in our research with our own customers, we found the majority of our customers simply didn't know these terms or couldn't actually apply them to real world benefits. So that's one concern. Another concern is that most of your simple activities are extremely hard to do, intimidatingly so. So to give you a trivial example, let's say I just wanted to choose a different website or a different part of a website. So to do this in Google Analytics, you just click on this menu at the top, and you get these 3 columns in this rather unusual expandable menu that I can kind of click on something, and then I click on something else, and when I click on that, then it scrolls up and reorders the things, and I get this. Of course, I've got 5 tabs above this, and then I've got 3 tabs above that. It's a lot. There's quite a bit to take in. And that's just something as simple as swapping between websites. We'll compare this with how Silktide handles this later on. And then lastly, I just want to show you a really simple activity, something that is so basic you can imagine your content editors, marketing managers, etc. wanting to do this pretty much any moment of the day, and that is tell me what content is popular and tell me how popular a specific page is in my site. Now, to do this in Google Analytics, and I actually had to write this down because I've used this product before, but it's not straightforward. You need to click firstly on behavior, which opens a submenu. You then need to click on site content, which opens a submenu. And then lastly, you need to click on all pages. And when you do that, you get this screen. And this screen shows you a chart here of the popularity and a table at the bottom showing your different pages and how popular they are in this table. But unless you are familiar with this, this is kind of intimidating. There's a lot going on here. There's all these columns. It's not necessarily clear what all this terminology means. And yeah, that's obviously 3 levels of navigation deep that you had to explore. I've used this product a lot and I still get lost just looking for simple stuff like this. So that's the current state of traditional analytics.
Okay, so in contrast to that, we designed analytics to be suitable for non-experts. So the idea here was we took a fresh look at everything that an analytics platform does, and we redesigned it to be something that a person could just look at and understand and apply without them needing a PhD in data science. Specifically, an objective of ours was to have 0 training by design. We wanted someone to be able to use our product and not require any training whatsoever and still be able to use it. To that end, a key deliverable we aimed for was to minimize the amount of jargon that we would use. And occasionally there's just a tiny bit of jargon that you do need. You might need to say something like bounce rate, because that is just an industry standard term. But whenever we do use something like that, we made sure to attach and integrate help videos to the specific use of that term. So if we say bounce rate, there's going to be a video next to bounce rate saying, what is bounce rate? I can show you a little bit of that now by comparing it with the Silktide platform.
Now, you saw earlier on that using Google and moving between websites was a fairly intimidating task. In the case of Silktide, it's literally just clicking on this drop-down and selecting the website or the segment of a website that you want to look at. One click away, and if you have a lot of these, you can just search through them. Nice and simple. Next, you actually have the data itself. Well, we've gone out of our way to avoid jargon. So although we will periodically mention something like a page view, when we do, we include a video that actually clarifies, for example, what's the difference between a visitor and a page view.
Visitors and page views kind of sound like the same thing. Don't they mean people who are looking at your website? Think of it this way. A visitor is one person. They might look at, say, your homepage. That counts as one page view. Now, that same visitor might click a link to see another page on your website. Now you have 2 page views, but still only 1 visitor.
And so on. So we continue this all the way down. If I was to look at the key information, top pages, top sources, I've got, say here, bounce rate. Now, bounce rate is one of those things we found so many users of analytics platforms do not understand. And because of that, again, we went to great lengths to actually sit down and explain it. You'll find that throughout our platform, anywhere that we introduce any terminology, we've gone to great lengths to try and explain what it means and why it matters to you.
Okay, moving on. The next thing, in order to actually make analytics something that someone would use and apply in the real world, is to make analytics integrate with the things that they already use on a daily basis. And of course, that includes Silktide. So the first thing we've done is using Silktide Analytics is integrated with Silktide in a way that your login, your single sign-on, etc., is connected, so you don't need to log into two separate platforms. Also, the permissions that have been set up for Silktide are integrated. So if a member of staff, for example, has access to work on a specific part of a specific website, then they can trivially be granted access to the analytics for the same areas of those websites that they are responsible for. We integrate analytics with the dashboarding and forthcoming reporting systems that you take for granted. So that allows you to be updated about those things in one place alongside all your QA markers. And we've extended the inspector. So what you're seeing here on the right-hand side is the inspector that you're probably already familiar with, the thing that you use to view issues in Silktide. But what we've done is we've actually incorporated analytics and, as you'll see later on, heat maps into the same user interface. So there's nowhere else to go. There's no new screen you need to learn. It's just incorporated into the areas you already experience. Next up, we made analytics safe to share. So we found this was a major problem for people. We found that they were worried that they could break their analytics by giving access to the wrong person. So we just designed it so that it isn't possible. With the standard permissions, you give access to analytics, they can't change anything. Likewise, privacy concerns are surprisingly an issue. With things like GDPR, Google Analytics and other providers can extract sensitive information about your visitors that you are not really authorized to just give to any random member of staff. We designed our platform to make that completely impossible, as you'll see later on. And then lastly, again, there's the per page permission. So you can actually define the specific pages that someone is allowed to view analytics for. And that is like a set of guardrails that prevents anyone from seeing something that they shouldn't. Ultimately, the aim here is just let your staff make smarter decisions with less friction. You don't want to have to ask a marketing manager or a data expert, can you tell me how well my blog article is going? You want to let them know that information themselves. Next up, measuring your ROI. So this is, of course, a key value proposition for any analytics provider, but we went well out of our way to try and make it as easy and straightforward as possible. Now, a virtually ancient quote at this point that you've probably heard before, half my advertising spend is wasted. The trouble is, I don't know which half. Could just as easily apply to a lot of modern day website marketing. It's not just advertising, it's knowing what content, what campaigns, what work you're doing to your website actually moves the needle. And so to that end, Silktide provides a range of features. The first challenge we're facing is addressing what content that you produce is actually working. And there's two areas to that. The first one is identifying the content that actually brings people in. So this is content that people, maybe they're typing in a web address for, or they're coming from social media, it's being shared, they're going through search engines, etc. Right? But whatever it is, you want to know what that content is to identify values being generated. And then you want to identify that they're actually engaging with that content. It's not enough just to have someone land on your blog article. If they're bouncing off it straight away, it's not doing you any good. What you may be surprised to learn is that, for example, Google Analytics does not actually track these in the way that you think it does. Due to a rather fundamental design limitation in the way Google Analytics works, it actually tracks visitors only when they view, or at times visitors only when they view 2 or more pages. Essentially, Google knows that someone's landed on a page in your site, and then they know that they've landed on a different page in your site. And when that happens, they count the time in between. What Silktide does is we're actually able to track the amount of time someone's spending on your page, even if they just land on one page and then leave, which Google has no measure of whatsoever. Now, the reason why that matters so much is because it so distinctly impacts the effectiveness of your content. If you have content that people are designed to land on one time, which is very common nowadays, maybe you have an article explaining coronavirus policies or whatever. If you have that, normally you don't need people to click on a second link. It's fine that they landed on the one, but you have no measure of that at the moment. And Silktide, of course, provides that for you, along with these other indicators. Another thing you want to do is you want to identify what campaigns actually work. So there's a good chance that you're running a ton of campaigns, even if you don't think of them as marketing specifically. So you probably have vanity URLs, things that you give out in leaflets or commercials. You almost certainly have some form of social media, some form of email campaigns, advertising, and specific campaigns within these. So you might have a specific email campaign to raise awareness for something or to boost engagement for something. And it's not enough just to be doing these things. You need to attribute the specific outcomes on your website from these campaigns. And so to do that, Silktide allows you to define and identify the effectiveness of your goals. So what that means is you actually tell Silktide the things that you need your visitors to be accomplishing on your website. You say things like, I need them to visit a product page, or contact us, or fill in this form, or complete a transaction, whatever it is. Whether you're commercially minded or more serving the public general interest, there are specific goals that indicate you as an organization have delivered real value. You know, someone may have just booked a bin collection for all it matters, but that is a specific value that is being delivered. And you can define those goals in your website, and you can use Silktide to identify how often they are being completed, and ideally to improve the rate at which they are being completed. You can also dive into this information. You can do things like filter it. So you can find out, you know, if people coming from, say, Facebook are completing something more effectively than if they're coming from, say, Twitter. And of course, you can dive this all the way down to your specific marketing campaigns and initiatives to identify, you know, maybe something that you put in a direct mail campaign is genuinely delivering ROI. Coming back to John Wanamaker, were he able to comment on it? I'm sure he would have said if only he'd used Silktide Analytics, but sadly he's not with us today. There are a few clear benefits you get from this. You can start comparing your costs with your results. You can optimize for the specific channels and a specific channel shift that you're looking to achieve as an organization. Most organizations are looking to move more of their communications online into low-cost channels, whether that be online chat or their website. You can start measuring those. And lastly, of course, you can just get more results from less. By having this information, you're able to more effectively commit your resources to where it matters most. Next up is optimizing your user experience. So many of you will relate with the experience of this woman. I'm just going to show you a 1-minute video of, let's just pretend this is you on the left and you have designed your website, and this is your website on the right. And you are watching for the first time your beautiful users experience your website.
This is a square. Can you guess which spot that goes in?
The square.
That's right. It goes in the square hole.
Yes. Okay.
And how about this rectangle? That one
Also the square.
that goes in there too.
Yeah.
Up next, we've got this thin rectangle.
The thin
Can
rectangle.
you guess where that goes?
The thin rectangle.
That's right. It goes in the square hole. And up next, a cylinder.
The circle.
I think that goes in
The circle.
the square hole. Now, we've also got this semicircle right here. Do you see a slot that would fit
The semicircle.
semicircle?
The semicircle.
That's right. It's the square hole. Okay. Up next, the triangle. We know what hole that goes
The
into,
triangle.
right?
Triangle.
That's right. The square hole. And up next, we have the arch.
The arch. The
And
arch.
you guessed it.
The arch.
It goes in the square hole.
God.
And I'm sure we've all been there. It's all too common to design your beautiful web experience and then only experience your customers engaging with it in a way that you maybe never could have imagined. So one of the things we've aimed to do here is to provide you with tools that enable you to more effectively measure how your customers are actually using your website, and to help you optimize and improve those experiences to deliver the outcomes you are measuring. So what does all that mean? Well, there are 3 key areas to this, and they all boil down to a different form of heat map. So Silktide Analytics introduces unlimited heat maps. That means every single page in your website is tracked in the 3 ways I'm going to show you now. And these are designed to deliver specific benefits for you. The first one, which we're going to look at, is called a click map. This is designed to help you measure your engagement, or essentially identify what do people actually do on your pages. Now, to give you an example of a click map, this is a click map for our own homepage, well, from a while ago, and it shows you immediately the colored blobs laid over the page, show you where people are actually choosing to click. So you can see the areas that are getting the most attention. You can see things like this button here getting less attention than this link here, despite the fact that this button is more clearly emphasized. This is the button requesting a demonstration, and this is the button allowing you to take a free tour of our product. So perhaps that shouldn't be surprising. One of the things that's particularly unusual, but we're quite proud of with Silktide and our heat map solution, is we've made our heat maps adapt to the interactivity in the page. So just to show you an example, if I was to open this drop-down menu at the top, I actually get a heat map of the contents of that menu, which we don't believe anyone else has actually done, but it's pretty cool. So you can actually see in this case that accessibility is getting the most clicks on, and say mobile is getting relatively few. The next thing we've done is measure attention. So attention is a little bit more nebulous, but we want to look at the ways that someone is actually paying attention to your site, because just because they visit it or click on something doesn't actually mean that they're engaged. So firstly, we're measuring how long people look at your content. As I mentioned earlier on, Google Analytics does not really do this properly. The first view on your site is simply untimed if someone leaves, which really gives you a false impression of what your attention is looking like. The next thing is we're looking at how much of your pages do visitors actually see. And by see, we measure several things. We measure them scrolling, but we also measure the words that they read on the page. And then what you want to do is you want to identify where you're losing people. You want to identify where people are dropping off, and maybe that's a hole in the bucket that you can plug. So just to give you a quick example, I'm going to give you a short video on scroll maps.
Now, as the author, I would be particularly interested to see...
Hold on.
So what is a scroll map and why does it matter? Well, I'm looking here at a blog post that I put together on the Silktide website. Now, as the author, I would be particularly interested to see how people are engaging with this article and maybe identify where I'm losing their attention and they're dropping off. Now, one of the things a scroll map does is it overlays on top of the page this indicator of how many of your visitors are actually able to see this content. So right now, if I move the mouse up and down, you'll see this says 100% of users reach this point. But as I scroll down, you'll notice the color changing slightly and it goes into yellows. And now we're at like 98%, 83%. So one of the first things that's happened is I've lost about 17% of the audience before they've actually scrolled to read the article. A number of people have just looked at this and they've gone, yeah, that doesn't work for me for whatever reason. I don't like the look of it. And they've just left. And now if I continue to scroll down, the people who get into the content, well, most of them keep going. So it's like 80%, 80%, 75. If I keep scrolling, yeah, we get down to 66 and so on. Gradually, this becomes cooler. And by the end of the article, we maybe have reached, let's say around here, that's about 33, 34% of people actually make it to the end. Now, that's actually not too bad by industry standards. But one of the wonderful things you can use this for is to identify specific areas where people are dropping off, where people go cold suddenly. Now, there aren't really that many in this article. It's more of a general attrition. But often you'll find there'll be an article and there'll be a very, very sudden, sharp point where you go from, say, this kind of yellow, red, right into blue in just a few paragraphs. And that's where you can identify, uh-oh, there's something we're doing wrong and it's something that we can improve. You can, of course, also use this number to identify generally which pages in your site are being read the most completely. And we provide that information in a table view as well, so you can compare multiple pages side by side.
Okay, so that's scroll maps. The last of the three indicators we've provided through heat maps is something new. This is something we've created and we don't believe anyone's done before in an analytics platform. And that's to measure frustration. So the way we define frustration, although it is actually something we're expanding as we go, but the way we describe frustration right now is we look at areas of a page that someone interacts with that don't do anything when clicked. So what does that actually tell you? Well, firstly, you learn areas of the page that don't work. So imagine you have a website form, something like, book an open day if you're, say, a university, right? If that form doesn't work, if people are filling in the form and they're clicking the button and then nothing happens, you have a problem, right? Potentially a very expensive problem. Now, what's often the case is you might have something like an email form where someone types in the email address and pushes a button, and you're going to get them pushing the button to go sign up for newsletter. And what they don't realize is they're expected to fill in the field to the left-hand side of it. They just didn't notice it. They saw the button, sign up for newsletter, and they're like, oh, I want to sign up for newsletter, click that. And because you haven't put in an error message, nothing happens. You're not showing them, you're not saying, oh, type in this field first. You just didn't bother to do that. And it's something that seems so simple, but often you'll miss. You won't realize because you never tested it, you never thought like that. Through this measure of frustration, you can identify those things. Similarly, you can identify broken expectations, things where someone's clicking something and they clearly expect it to do something, but you maybe never thought of it like that. And ultimately, what this allows you to do is deliver much more effective user experiences. So to show you that, I'm going to give you a brief demonstration of a frustration map.
On this page, but so what is a frustration map and why does it matter? Well, I'm looking here at an example website, and the frustration map shows you through these colored blobs where people are clicking on this page, but nothing is happening. So what this indicates is that a person is expecting, probably, something to happen, and that this website is not delivering on that expectation. So in this case, you'll see this this page is easier actually if I just hide the frustration map for a second. You'll see there's this text in the middle, there's this text here, and there's this button. Now, of course, you might expect to click on this button, you might expect to click on this navigation. But when we look at the frustration map, we learn that a number of people are actually just clicking on this text at the top or on this text here. Okay, fine, maybe that seems unnecessary or ridiculous. But something that is more interesting to us is if I scroll right down to the bottom, there's this very dense pack of people clicking on this text here. And again, if we hide the frustration map, you'll see what they're doing is they're clicking on where to find us. Now, the expectation they probably have is that this is a link, that this is something they see where to find us, they want to click on this. They're probably expecting to see a dedicated page, maybe gives them directions or further information about their location. But of course, that's currently missing. What we're seeing here simply is a piece of text. And so the user's expectations are broken. Now, the other thing that can happen with a frustration map is we can indicate where functionality is actually broken. So were there to be, say, this contact us page, contact us button was to fail for some reason, so that clicking on it did not actually load a new page, or it didn't open a window, or whatever it's supposed to do. If that were to happen, the frustration map would indicate that very strongly. And so it would become immediately apparent that there is a fault in the website and something that desperately needs to be improved.
Okay, so that's frustration maps. Next up, accelerating your QA. So of course, Silktide is primarily a quality assurance platform. It's something that helps you measure and improve the quality of your website. And when you're doing that, you may feel periodically a little bit overwhelmed. It's true enough that most websites have a number of problems, and large websites tend to have an almost infinite number of problems. And it can therefore become quite challenging to choose what to focus on that makes the biggest difference. Now, in Silktide presently, one of the main things you see is the quantity of an issue. So I'm looking here at broken links. And by default, what Silktide will show you is through this column you're seeing here on the right, is the quantity of these issues. So in other words, the quantity of these broken links. This broken link appears once, this broken link appears twice. That can be one way you have of identifying what to focus on. But now that we have analytics in there, we can actually add engagement. So we now gain this additional column. And this column actually shows us how many times a given broken link has been clicked in, say, the last 30 days. So this is an excellent way of really understanding what problems you should focus on first. Ultimately, this allows you to prioritize what you're going to work on based upon its real world impact. And we think this is quite transformative for what you can do with Silktide. The other thing that you benefit from here is this lets you identify and eliminate waste. So it's quite common for a large website to have pages that simply aren't being viewed, or to have, say, PDFs or other documents that aren't even being downloaded. The reason that matters is because when you're looking to triage problems, when you're looking to address things, Sometimes there are problems you may not even need to deal with, or you may find it makes more sense to remove, say, a out of date and irrelevant PDF than it does to try and remediate it. With Silktide Analytics, you now have that information at your fingertips, and it's very easy to just view it side by side alongside your issues and decide what you want to do more effectively. And then our last point is to become privacy safe. So this is something you have probably seen a lot of if you pay attention to website news at least. Cookies are dying. I'm sure you've seen headlines along these lines. Tracking cookies are dead, where's cookie going away, the death of the third-party cookie is inevitable, etc., etc. But what does this actually really mean, and why should you even care? Well, all traditional analytics platforms are based on cookies, but Silktide has come up with a way to do analytics that doesn't use cookies at all. Now, let's just talk a little bit about these beloved cookie banners and what the law currently requires of you when you use cookies in any form. And let's be honest, I think every single person on this call is going to be using cookies on their website. So the law requires 3 key things for a cookie banner like this. Firstly, your banner cannot deny access to your website without at least a really good reason. So in other words, you can't force someone into accepting cookies to, say, read your news article, because there's no good reason that they should need to enable cookies to read your news article. You might feel that there is, but that it doesn't apply to the user. From their perspective, it does not. Now, it may turn out that in order to show someone a video or something like that, you genuinely do need cookies because that's what YouTube forces upon you. But unless it is forced, you cannot deny access. The next point is you must attribute equal weighting to any accepting or rejecting options you provide. Google actually famously got sued over this quite recently. So they used to have a modal that would pop up when you go to Google for the first time, and it would have like a button that's basically accept cookies or accept recommended cookies or whatever it would say. And then it would have a tiny, tiny little link in gray, faint in a corner, hiding away saying, yeah, I don't want to do that. And it would actually provide, you'd click that and then it would open another window and it would ask you a dozen questions and it would be just as awkward and awful as possible. This is not allowed. To be clear, you need to provide a clear and direct option to either accept or reject, and it needs to be equally weighted. So that's a big deal. And then the last point is you cannot assume consent. And this is something that in our observation, our research, many websites are not actually abiding by, or at least not abiding by honestly, which is that they put a cookie banner on their website and then they just assume that because they put the banner on the website, they're now compliant with the law. But the whole point of the law is that a user has to provide informed consent. They accept your cookies. And often what they're doing is they're not providing any consent whatsoever. They are just seeing the banner, maybe they're ignoring it, maybe they're clicking go away, and the website is still using the cookies that the user did not consent to. That is explicitly not allowed. Now, there's some further research into this, which will tell you that the way people experience cookie banners is not particularly what maybe the website owner would like. From Advanced Metrics study in 2018, we've actually seen numbers that are worse than these, but let's just go with this because it does depend on the cookie banner you're using. You'll find that 76% of people are completing no action. In other words, they're just leaving the banner or whatever it is, not doing anything. 11% of people are accepting cookies. 12% are just closing the banner, kind of going, go away, leave me alone. And just under 1% are actually going into the settings to modify or change anything. So in other words, roughly 1 in 10 of your visitors is actually giving consent to use cookies. And of course, because you need cookies to use most analytics solutions, what that means is you have one of 2 choices. You can either measure about 1/10 of your visitors through traditional analytics, or you can choose to break the law. That's typically your choice. And unfortunately, what we've seen is a lot of websites break the law, but hopefully that's not something you're aspiring towards. Now with Silktide, of course, we offer a new solution. We offer a way that you can actually do this without requiring cookies in the first place. So you're able to attain 100% of your visitors' behavior, and you don't have to worry about the law at all. But let's talk a little bit more about why cookies are doomed. Well, you may not know this, but cookies are, of course, heavily regulated by GDPR and CCPA. They're also increasingly blocked. All major browsers, except for Chrome, now block third-party cookies automatically. So that's Firefox, that's Safari, etc. They all block cookies. Devices, including pretty much every Apple device now, blocks cookies, third-party cookies by default. Apps like various security extensions, toolbars, and so on people install, and of course the banners themselves, when people are implementing them correctly, they are typically blocking about 90% of the cookies, which is not great. So that means, of course, that your cookie-based analytics is just decreasing in effectiveness and will progressively deteriorate to being almost worthless. And let's not forget the fact that our users hate them. And no one really likes these cookie banners. And I'm sure you're not the only one who's gone to a website and seen one of these things and been like, yeah, you know what, I'm just going to hit the back button. I don't care. So they definitely have a cost to your engagement. Also, just piling on the privacy angle, Google Analytics, it's not really free, because if you don't already know, Google isn't stupid. They're not taking the cost of building a billion-dollar analytics platform for nothing. They're using your customers' personal data to target advertising at them, and they're using it to understand what your visitors are doing. So a visitor that comes to your website, when you have Google Analytics, you are feeding their data to Google Analytics, and you are feeding it to them in the US, which for many European states is a legal impossibility. You are literally legally prohibited from doing that. After the collapse of the Privacy Shield and other legal frameworks, it's no longer something you're allowed to do. And also, just on a moral angle, it's unacceptable for many other organizations that their users' personal data is being shipped off to a third-party company to basically mine it for ads. I want you to think, if the visitors you have going to your website, if they would feel comfortable knowing their personal data about what they're doing on your website is being presented to Google in order to profile them. For example, if it's an NHS website, do you really want that information being presented to Google? I would think probably not. Indeed, as has been said in the social dilemma, if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. So there is a better way. So Silktide obviously introduces a few pioneering advances in this field. The first thing is we've been able to completely eliminate cookies. And this isn't a trick. We're not using some cookie equivalent, some cookie alternative. We are just not using cookies, period. There is no substitute. It's just there's no tracking data whatsoever. So we do not have the ability to track someone in that way if we wanted. And that is by design. Because of this, there is no privacy exposure. So we've gone really far out of our way. And if someone wants to ask me questions about this later, feel free, I can go into the details. But for example, when we looked at our analytics, most analytics providers track the location of a visitor right down to the finest point of longitude and latitude. You could literally tell a visitor on your website pretty much comes from a given street. And we were looking at this and we're like, yeah, we don't even want that data. We don't want you to have that data. Why would you need that data? It's completely useless and it's morally unscrupulous to have it. So we went out of our way to go, no, you want to know the region and the country. So we'll tell you they're in England or Scotland or Wales, or we'll tell you they're in California or Texas, but we won't tell you they're a 16 whatever drive of this road, of this street, of this town, because that's just not something you need. And we've gone out of our way throughout the platform to remove that kind of sensitive information. This, of course, just means, for your perspective, it's one less privacy concern. It's one less thing to analyze and build a whole policy document about, and then put disclaimers about on your website and so on and so on. And ultimately, what we believe we're headed to as a future is a future where we're without cookies. And this is definitely a better future that's for your users. And it's something we wanted to pioneer. So something we did on our own website that you're welcome to read about in your own time is we worked to remove all of our cookies and therefore all of our cookie banners, because we simply don't do anything on our website that would require one. And I can tell you that is wonderful for our user engagement, because people no longer have these irritating banners in their way, and we no longer have to start off their first experience with us with a pop-up or something that slides in and gets in their way. So that was all of our key points. I just want to recap with saying what our mission is, because our mission, I think, kind of unifies this. We're aiming to empower website teams to build better web experiences. And through those specific areas, I think that's something that we're helping to achieve. Of course, we have many, many exciting areas that we wish to develop in the near future. And I'd love to hear from you if you have any suggestions. But for now, that's a wrap on this one. If anyone has any questions, Adam, I believe you're still on the call. It might be best to hear from you, actually, if you don't mind joining on. If you could just read those out, and I'll be happy to take anything you want to throw at me.
Yeah, no questions come through just yet.
Okay. Well, that makes it as easy. What I can do while we're waiting, I can give a little bit of an elaboration on. Oh no, we have got one. Do you want to read that out?
Yeah, sure. We've got a question from Ian saying, "Can you see the click maps on mobile?"
Yes, that's a good question. Yes, so I didn't actually mention that. So we actually provide all of the heat maps information. Works in the same way it works in the regular inspector. So that means you can test in mobile, in desktop, in tablet. We also do simulations for things like specific laptops nowadays. So you can even see, for example, what it looks like in a MacBook Air if you want. And we provide a whole range of different devices you can explore in your own time.
Great. Okay. We've got another question from Nick asking, how would cookies be affected by Tag Manager?
Okay, so we don't use a tag manager for our analytics. And one of the reasons we don't do that is because at the moment, to the best of our knowledge, all tag managing solutions use cookies, which we don't particularly like for obvious reasons. We used to use Google Tag Manager, like many of you probably, and it's just incompatible with our kind of our philosophy now. Now, because of that, we've actually got plans on our roadmap to build our own Silktide Tag Manager, which will be designed from day one to avoid the use of cookies. And ultimately, we want to build one that is also designed to help you plug in third parties that are both cookie-free and accessible. So there's a bit of a medium-term roadmap item, but we want to get to the point where people can add things like chat widgets and so on without having to worry about their privacy or their accessibility concerns.
Great. I'll just kind of jump to another question that Nick's asked as well, which is, can we track across different domains?
Yes, so the way we've designed this is you kind of ring fence the domain names that you want to be considered as one unified property, and that works. But unless something is in that ring fenced allowance, then it simply, there's no way even for us to identify if a person who went to one of those collections of domains is the same as someone else who goes to a different collection of domains. What that means is, for example, we have various large customers that you may or may not have heard of. If we were suddenly to turn evil, we could not tell if a visitor to one of those websites is the same as a visitor to, say, one of your websites. It's literally impossible for us to do by design.
Great. I got a question from Sarah asking, can you exclude internal traffic on websites?
Yes, you absolutely can. We'll provide a number of options for that. You can set up a segment that filters out by, for example, IP address or by some other, geographic location or something like that. To be clear, we do not ever store any kind of IP address, but purely for filtering purposes, you can use it to block something, to exclude something out.
Perfect. I've got another question from Ian. Would we need to remove our current cookies banner? This appears on the side of our website and on different previously click maps shows up, making the click map useless makes the click map useless because you can't see past the cookies sidebar.
Okay, so there's a couple of interesting questions there. So removing your current cookies banner. So whether you want to remove your cookies banner is kind of an independent question to the second part, but obviously that'll just come down to your legal exposure. If you have a sorry, my brain got distracted for a second. Sorry. If your cookie banner is legally required, you still need to do one, basically. So maybe you're using something else like YouTube or whatever, and you can't get rid of cookie banner for that reason. As far as it affecting click maps, no, we actually provide an ability to remove the cookie banner from our inspector, so you can hide it and then you can still view the clicks from behind it. So there's two ways to do that. You can teach us to do it permanently and automatically, or if you prefer, there's an option that lets you kind of delete the hovering over element when you view a heat map, and it just gets it out of the way. So you can get around it either way.
Great. Cool.
I see a vulgar question. I see a vulgar question alert. I may as well address it. What is the cost? So the cost. Well, I can't actually give you a straight answer because there isn't a cost. There's a calculation for it, but I can tell you how that works. It's based on the number of yearly page views you receive. So you will receive a certain number of page views over the course of a year. Sometimes you'll have really popular months, sometimes less popular months. You need to ballpark that. If you go over that limit, then we just stop recording the excess data. But basically, it's just based on that allowance. And then there's the option to have heat maps, which makes a percentage difference to the overall cost. But basically, most people probably want heat maps. But if you prefer, you can choose not to have them. And that's the pricing model, basically. Do you want heat maps? How many page views do you get? We look it up in a table, and then we give you a number. So if you know those numbers, we're happy to give you a price. Yeah, just get in touch for a demo. Right, okay. You carry on with your questions, Adam.
Yes, Phil's also asked, is a trial an option?
So yeah, we can offer a trial. Just basically, you just need to get in touch, and typically the trial will need to be limited in some way, obviously, because let's say you're eBay or something, and you have hundreds of millions of hits per minute. We might not necessarily do that as a free demo, but for most organizations, we can just set you up a demonstration. You can try it out.
Mm-hmm. Great. And is it available today? Is a question from Ty.
Yeah, it's available today. Yeah, we have customers using it right now.
Perfect. Another question about when it launches. Yes, already ready to go. So the question from Nick, how would our customers track Google Ads performance?
So I didn't go into too much detail here because it can get a bit technical, but basically you're probably already using something for Google Ads. You're probably already using a UTM campaign or something similar. It's like a tag or a query parameter you might apply to your advertising. We support that out the gate. If you need more complex things, you can customize it. But for most existing Google Ad campaigns, it'll literally just work. And we'll provide you the information that you would expect. And it'll just show you like campaign and amount of traffic and so on, all broken down by that campaign, by that medium, by that source, etc., etc.
Great. Question from Elizabeth: do we have a limit on how many websites can be managed under analytics?
No, it makes no difference. We just base the pricing on the total number of page views in a year. So whether that's one website or 1,000 websites, it doesn't really make any difference to us.
Perfect. David's asked if there is any way to import current Google Analytics data so that they're not kind of starting from scratch with analytics.
Not at this time. So we do know Google Analytics 3 provides some API that might make that possible, whereas Google Analytics 4 does not. It's actually an interesting design choice by them to prohibit export, which is, of course, outside of our control. If there's significant demand from people wanting V3, in theory, we could look at that, but it's not currently on our roadmap.
Okay, great. And Alex has asked, since that the cost is defined based on the page views, are bots filtered out from this?
So by default, yes, they are. It's actually optional. Something that you may find just funny because it was surprising to us is that Google Analytics by default does not exclude bots at all. You actually have to go to extra work and teach Google how to exclude bots. And we only identified this when we were testing our data versus theirs, and we were like, why is our number so different? And it's because there are now, of course, so many bots out there, and Google by default tracks them, which we thought was absurd. But anyway, yes, you presumably wouldn't want to pay for that, and you absolutely just check a box, which is the default, and they will be excluded. Perfect,
thank you. Well, that about wraps up our questions. There's no more coming through at the moment.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I think that was, oh no, one more.
Oh, one more from Ian. Can different websites be split, or are all analytics on one dashboard?
Yeah, so actually both. What you do is you define a analytics property, which essentially is a collection of, it could be one website, it could be whatever website you want to put. So for example, for Silktide, we have our main silktide.com website, but we also have our index, which is index.silktide.com, and we want to consider those kind of one property, because even though they're on slightly different domains, we consider a visitor to one to be kind of part of the same website. It's quite a common setup. So we do that. So there's one property, and I can look at all the traffic across that property. But then if I want to split it and I want to look at one of those websites individually, I can do that. And if I want to go even deeper and I want to see just the visitors inside, I don't know, Silktide's blog or something, I can define that. And again, I can just keep filtering the data down as much as I want to whatever levels I want.
Perfect. Thank you. Ty's asked, can analytics dashboards integrate with existing QA dashboards in the platform?
Yes, so we do that already in a number of ways. Analytics information, such as, say, the clicks for broken links, or the views for a PDF or a web page, that information is already pulled out of our analytics, and it is put into the reports for a website. But if what you mean, because it's a little bit vague actually, dashboards here could mean the dashboards at the top, or it could mean the website reports. We also do that. So yes, your dashboards can incorporate analytics data. So you could have a dashboard that would show you your websites, and it would show you something like, let's say, your accessibility scores and the number of website visitors you get. And so you could pull all of that information together and put it in one table, and that's accomplished with dashboards.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Right. Well, I think that's all of them. Listen to the one pops up last minute. I think that's it.
That was brilliant, guys. Thank you very much. That was a very interesting set of questions. I think we delivered a lot of value there. So I hope you found this useful. There will be a recording of this, I'm sure, shared on our website in the near future. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your customer success manager, or just drop us a message on our website. We'll be happy to give you a free demonstration.